Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, hate crimes rising. Also, Alabama's porn law goes into effect. And Attorney General Steve Marshall thinks there are Venezuelan gangs flying into Alabama.
So he clamped this thing on my head and said it'd help me to think. And you know something? He's right. I've been sitting there with this bucket on my head and just thinking and thinking and thinking.
You just keep on thinking there, Steve-O. It's good for you. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Josh Moon, investigative reporter at APR and columnist. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
Hey, y'all. Yes. Good to see y'all again.
Yeah,
I feel like we just did this yesterday.
Yeah, it kind of feels like deja vu a little bit.
All over again, right? There you go. Hey, you know, we always have a good time here, but sometimes you have to just buckle down and tackle some of these serious items that, you know, we wish didn't exist. But domestic violence is a serious issue, not only here in Alabama, but around the nation. But I got to thinking the other day, you know, we have a state lawmaker, Republican Tracy Estes, who was arrested for domestic violence in the third degree. His wife got a protective order against him. And it made me want to look again at domestic violence in Alabama. And startling enough is that between 2020 and 2022, 50%, nearly 50% of the women murdered in Alabama were murdered by their spouses, Susan. We have one of the highest murder rates by domestic partners, women, than any state in the union.
In fact, we're in the top 5 nationwide of domestic violence murders in the United States. And it's something that we really need to address. As you know, I've worked in and out of this for years in one capacity or another. And as a state, we've just simply got to step up and do something. And the first thing we've got to do is understand domestic violence. It's not just that someone hits someone else. It's a lot more to it than that. In the fact that a lot of these women are trapped in the situations they're in where they don't have access to the car because he's got the car keys. They don't have access to their bank accounts. They don't have access to actually get out of this situation. And what we need to do as a state is look at this issue and say, where can we help? We've had a lot of domestic violence shelters throughout Alabama. A lot of them have closed. I work very closely with the one in Pell City. It's now gone. And we provided a refuge for these women to take their children and get out of that situation and start life anew. But the state at this point is going to have to get in, understand the problem, and understand how we can get in there and help. And it's going to be on the legislature's back to do that.
Josh, it always is about limited resources, and that's one of the things that Susan's saying, we need more resources. But we haven't seen the legislature enact any meaningful legislation to address domestic violence in any way.
You know, and I think a lot of it could be tied to other problems in the state. You see in this, Alabama ranks 5th with the most domestic violence incidents in the nation, and you look at all the states that rank somewhere in that top 10 area, and they're typically the poorer states that we have with high poverty rates, and a lot of the other problems that go along with that stuff. And domestic violence is one of those things. Because you typically have them in states that do have high poverty rates, don't have great health care systems, don't have great mental health care systems, and you're not addressing those issues, which oftentimes are the root causes of a lot of this stuff. Anger issues that exist within people that are never addressed, that never get properly handled, because so too often you have a domestic violence incident, they call the police, that somebody gets locked up for 24 hours. and that's roughly it. That's our treatment for this
Right.
thing for the most part. And if until we start addressing some of the root causes, because look, I understand, and I'm not making excuses by any means for anybody who's done this, because it's a horrible situation. But you also have kids who are going to be affected for life by these situations. And whoever the parent is that's involved in the aggressor in those things, they're going to continue to be those kids' parents.
Yes.
And so we got to figure out a way to address these things and get people on a better pathway.
There's also that you need to understand too that this is generational. Kids tend to mimic what they see in their parents, so it's a cycle. It continues to be a cycle. And one other thing, while a lot of domestic violence does happen in the more poverty-stricken areas, don't forget there's country club domestic abusers too. It goes for all spectrums of income levels.
Well, what I would like to do is see the legislature actually take up some of these issues and give more funding to these issues. I want to move on here. We got about 2 minutes left. We've seen a dramatic rise in hate crimes in this country over the last several years. Hate crimes have skyrocketed some 63%, especially among the Jewish community, in the Jewish community, and also on individual blacks and in the LGBTQ community. And Josh, a lot of this, I think, goes back to our politicians. And I do believe that it's the rhetoric nationally, it's the way things are handled even at the State House that cause a lot of this hate that we're seeing.
Well, listen, let's don't lump all politicians together because we know where a lot of this comes from. It comes from the right. All right. It comes from the right that have vilified a number of different people for political gain. All right. And listen, I don't want to just say all Republicans or whatever, but this is where this thing comes from, is on the right. You don't hear this sort of speech about groups of people and vilifications of people from the left, from Democrats and people that are looking at it. They're typically trying to make sure that these folks have more rights and have a better life in this country. And right now, you see it with the Haitian population that's being vilified unfairly. That the current nominee for the Republican Party is threatening to deport the legal people here and turning them into villains. We've seen it with the LGBTQ folks with the library issue and making it seem as though these folks are pedophiles and vilifying them. When you do these sorts of things and you threaten those people and tell them their children are under threat from these folks, what do you think the response is going to be?
Well, and it just and the rise of this hate crime, Susan, I and maybe I just missed it when you and I were growing up. I just didn't see it. I'm sure it was there, but it was not so in your face the way it is now. I know partially social media exacerbates the problem, but we really, I don't know how we get back to a civil society.
I don't know either, but we're talking about, in a 2023 report, 11,862 hate crimes. That's higher than it was in the early 90s. Since all of this started being tracked. I don't know how we get back to that. I mean, we've got to cut, like Josh said, some of this rhetoric out of national politics. That's got to stop to start with. But we've also got to, I think, as a society, look inside and see what's causing this.
Well, it is a problem, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. But we're going to have to leave it right there for now. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Your home is your most valuable asset. But what if someone tried to steal it from you? Property fraud is one of the fastest growing areas of fraud in the country today.
As a district attorney, I've seen firsthand the devastating effects of property fraud. That's why I'm proud to support the Montgomery County Probate Court's REACT program.
REACT is designed to protect your property and to give you peace of mind. By signing up, you'll receive an email notification if a document is filed against your property.
This program is a game changer. It has the potential to prevent fraud and protect countless homeowners throughout Montgomery County.
So don't wait. Sign up for REACT today and protect your home.
Protect your home with REACT. Sign up today.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. I remember Josh reported last week, and we talked about it on the show, how Attorney General Steve Marshall traveled to Sylacauga, and he was checking with the sheriff over there, the mayor, and the folks in charge, that there were no problems with the Haitian migrants that are living there. And they told him, Susan, there's no problem. He looked at other places, no problem. So what did Steve do? He went on a podcast and said that violent Venezuelan gangs were flying into the state and into the United States. Now, I don't know that there's, like Venezuelan air landing over in Sylacauga and Birmingham or anything else, but he would make it seem like these are the worst gangs since, the Jets and the Sharks, just dancing criminals.
Dancing and singing criminals.
Yeah.
Yes, Jesus. He thought he was going to be able to go to Sylacauga and Athens, find all these problems, have a little mini parade around his desk in his office, cheering himself on. And when he didn't find anything there, he had to create something, much like some other political figures nationally do these days about immigrants.
I'm telling you, Josh, he was just disappointed that he couldn't find any trouble. So he created it. And when he talked about these guys as being gangs, he was like, oh, these are the worst gangs ever.
They got dirty fingernails and all.
Yeah. They'll just rape your motorcycle, burn your house to the ground. Just insanity, right?
Yeah, what do you say? It makes the MS-13 guys look like choir boys,
Yeah.
and it cracks me up to listen to them talk about these folks from other countries, because they know what they're doing. They all know what they're doing. And Steve Marshall's no dummy here. He knows what he's doing. He knows nobody knows a Venezuelan gang, so they're just slapping South American countries' names on these things and saying, oh, yeah, listen, the Colombian street gangs, the Bolivian street gangs are coming for us. Honest to God, in about 40 years, we're going to be talking about the Antarctic gangs. Moving farther south. And, it just is. It all plays back into what we were just talking about with the hate. It all plays back into that with the vilification of people, but to scare folks, and because they have no actual policies to fall back on to do things. And this Venezuelan thing started out of one incident in a single apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, in which some people there were going back and forth with each other. And they made it seem as though Venezuelan folks were just coming and taking over the entire town. And it's just nonsense. And look, I'll put our gangs up against any of their gangs. All right. There is no scarier gangs in the world than our gangs. Okay. Yeah. And so
you mean like the Proud Boys?
Stop trying to scare people, by using these other nations as punching bags. It's just ridiculous.
It's crazy. And really, if you think about Aurora, Colorado, the mayor, the governor, they've all come out just like the mayor in Ohio and the governor in Ohio and said, this is not true. This is not real. It's not happening. But they stick with it.
In Colorado, it was an isolated incident that had more to do with the landlord than anything else.
Isn't that where Wayne's World happens? Is it Aurora, Colorado? I think so.
It's in the ether
someone
somewhere.
on TV once say it's not a lie if you really believe it, and so it's
there you go.
I think the policy of the Republican Party at this point is it's not a lie if we can make them believe.
Well,
it.
you know what and I think I've heard this is that Democrats have been saying that mariachi bands may be invading a Mexican restaurant near you. I've heard that. I don't know if it's true. You know, just something I've heard. I heard it on the internet, I think.
Well, you know it's got to be true then. Or TV.
I want to get back to this next thing. Federal lawsuit hits Alabama. Secretary of State Wes Allen removed about 3,200 people off the Alabama rolls, acting like they were non-citizens. Many of them, most of them, were citizens. Now the federal government, the Department of Justice, is suing Wes Allen and the state of Alabama for doing what they shouldn't have been doing.
Right. And what he did, while he's got a right to look at it, he did it during under the quiet period provision, where there's supposed to be a 90-day period before an election where nobody does anything to change any rules, any laws, or that would affect the election. Well, he did this 84 days before an election. That's a no-no.
And Josh, the problem is, and we've talked to some of these people, they are naturalized U.S. citizens. They registered to vote. And instead of digging into who it was, he just, carte blanche, just ordered them off the menu. You're out of here. You're gone.
Yeah. These are Americans. These are American citizens, and they have every right to vote. And what he's done, I've told several people, it's no different than going into a church and removing somebody and saying, no, you don't have the right to worship today.
Yeah.
Or you don't have the right to your free speech today. These are the same rights that he's taken away from these folks right here. And now they have to go and try to prove themselves again through some process. Many of them may not even receive the letter. They may not have noticed it or understood what the letter meant. But when they go to the polls, they're going to know that they don't have the right to vote in this election. And that is a problem because Wes Allen could have checked this. They're only talking about 3,200 people. They've got computers at the Secretary of State's office. He could have checked to see who these people were, but he didn't do it because he was trying to beat that deadline. He didn't do it. He was trying to beat that deadline. And so he just went haphazard with this thing and just said, out of hell with it. We'll just get 3,200 people off the rolls.
What he's doing is getting 3,200 people off the rolls so they won't be able to vote. And he'll have the ramifications after the election.
Well, and the thing is, it's not, and we see this in red states across the country where they are purging voter rolls by the hundreds of thousands in certain places and claiming that there's illegal voters on there, foreign voters on the voting rolls, which there's no evidence that this is widespread, but it's about subtraction. It's about having fewer people's votes cast than it is about letting everyone who is eligible to vote casting their ballot.
And which party does that?
Well,
at
the current moment, it is the Republican Party that's doing that.
And we know
every single time.
And we know somebody who actually received one of those letters. And I told him, I said, you better take that registration to the courthouse because I don't want it to get lost in the mail somewhere.
Well, he is from New Zealand, and he could be scary.
Oh, yeah, he could be a member of a gang. Yeah.
Those Australian biker gangs that are flying to America. Anyway, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
My personal biggest pet peeve is kids who are not properly restrained, whether that be in a booster seat, a car seat, or even a simple seatbelt. Kids, they become projectiles, and it's terrifying.
It absolutely breaks my heart to know that something so innocent could be punished so severely.
Your children rely on you to be that person that says, no, you need to put your seatbelt on.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Well, on October 1st, Alabama's porn law went into effect. And what it did was it blocks anyone from accessing a legitimate porn site or pornography on their computer in the state of Alabama. Now, under the guise of protecting children, Susan, they passed this law. Now, it is not about protecting children. No. This is always a lie that they use to do what they want. This is about controlling what people can see, what they can enjoy. Now, you may not agree with people watching pornography, and I may not agree with it, but there are people that do enjoy that form of entertainment. And the Supreme Court has found that that form of entertainment is not illegal.
No,
Now, the
it's not.
question, which is going to go before the Supreme Court in this term, is whether states can block this from adults being able to access it. Now, it's one of those things that you know it's about control. It's about the same as the library books. It's the same as, it's the same as all these things they don't want you to. It's the same as abortion. It's the same as abortion pills. It's all about controlling people. And this thing about banning pornography is in Project 2025, which is the Republican plan for the next Republican administration. But what's your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts come down to, if you look real closely, there's also a 10% tax in here that they're wanting to impose on these companies.
That may be the whole deal right
on
there.
the adult content providers. I think that's where we're going to end up with this. No, this is a restriction of freedom of speech. I mean, I'm sorry, it falls under freedom of speech. It does. And, my new favorite phrase is mind your own damn business. Get out of mine.
Yeah.
So, it's not my business if somebody wants to watch porn. It's not their business if I do.
Yeah.
And trying to say that you don't think for a minute that a teenager can get around all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's many ways around it that I know about, and I'm ancient. So
You are?
yeah, well, but I'm not a teenager
Oh,
anymore. Okay.
well.
So yeah, if they want to get to it, they're going to get to it. This is bull.
I mean,
Yes.
Josh, it's all about the children, right?
Yeah, well, part of this law is also that in order to access the sites, you have to enter a government ID,
Right.
Your official driver's license number or something like that to prove that you are an adult. And I was just told right before we came on the air in a breaking story that this week there have been more cases of identity theft from apparently fathers having their ID stolen by their own children. I don't know what's going on there, but and so it's really a conundrum that we're facing. Listen, it is it's absurd on a lot of levels, and it kind of goes. What's funny to me is anybody who really kind of knows how the internet and things work. Some of the ideas that our legislature, which is in fact ancient. In average age, I would say, the things that they pass sometimes are so. I mean, it's almost like, oh, isn't that cute? That they think this is going to work because this will apply to only the reputable porn sites out there that are operating within the United States. All of the ones that are coming from offshore sites, in other countries. They don't give a damn what law Alabama passes. They don't care. You can access anything on there. And it's absurd that they believe that this will actually curtail people from doing it because you're going to stop a handful of the most popular mainstream sites.
Well, and the funny thing is, while this was going through the legislature last session,
I know where you're going.
Yeah, there was a legislator on the floor, I believe it was the House floor, that was busted by the press who could see him with porn on his phone on the floor of the state legislature.
There was one that had the sugarbaby.com.
There was sugarbaby.com.
Where you find a woman to hook up with, or I guess you can get a man to hook up with, and
but he was on the floor of the legislature while this was
hook up with.
While this was being voted on.
I mean, it's you can see him on there. So but to think that they're not hypocrites about this thing. Alabama was one of the leading sites, I think it was number 3 or something at one point on Pornhub, the big porn site was blocked. And the favorite type of porn that people were watching was transgender porn.
But that was research. That was research, Bill. That was just research for all the trans stuff they're doing.
See where the piping goes or something like that?
Something like
I don't
that.
know.
How all that works.
Well, it just is outrageous that they want to tell adults what they can and cannot do. That ought to be up to people to make up their own mind how to do that. I do want to get to some good news here.
Well, good news.
Real quick. Some very, very good news. I mean, it's good and bad news.
Right.
The Fitzgerald Washington has announced his retirement. He is the longest serving Secretary of Labor in Alabama, a great guy. He has done a fabulous job by almost all accounts. There were some issues during COVID that were through no fault of his own, through understaffing. He received a lot of heat and other things. But in general, and on top of all that, Fitzgerald Washington and his staff, one of the best run departments in Alabama, and just a charming gentleman and a true American.
You talked about the COVID crisis. Yeah, they had the crisis because the legislature had cut the staffing in the Department of Labor because our unemployment numbers were so far down. But when COVID hit, all of those applications started coming in. They did. It was a mess to begin with, but they did get it straightened out, even the limited staff that they had. So I have to give kudos to his staff as well.
Josh, there's very few times that we can actually say, hey, good job. But I think this is one of them where, you know, we can say that Secretary Washington has been a good public servant.
Yeah, I think so. I think he tried his absolute best in a very tough situation in COVID. I think a lot of people got mad at him and at that department because it took a long time to get some things processed. And he took a lot of shots from some elected officials whose actual fault it was that the place was so understaffed when it happened. And, you know, and in the meantime, I've noticed that a lot of other heads of agencies in this state seem to skate by, you know, Department of Corrections, you know, and some other ones, they seem to skate by all the time. Everybody defending them. And I can't put my finger on why it was that Fitzgerald Washington just kept getting those slings and arrows thrown his way. But, you know, he weathered the storm and good for him. And, you know, and I think you're right. He did the best he could in a bad situation during that. And overall, I think he did a pretty good job.
Well, we want to thank Secretary Washington for his service to the state. And your talent and charm will be missed around Montgomery.
And we wish him well.
We do wish him well.
We do.
You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.
Banner Elk, they're out of water, they're out of food. So we just delivered one load of water to them. In the next couple days, we're going to be moving more water, more food, baby formula.
The medical system here and also in nearby Avery County at our Linville Hospital, they've asked for help. And so as we deploy our teams to help recover from these floods and help dig out homes and cut trees back, we're also helping medically.
Just really grateful for the partnership with Samaritan's Purse to have a little hope in our community about 12 hours after what could have been probably the most devastating thing that we've probably seen in our lifetime.
So would you please pray for those gospel opportunities, bringing people together in the name of Jesus to serve and to help and bring the gospel.
And that's why our volunteers go out. They want to serve and love others, but they want to serve in the name of Jesus Christ. So if you want to get involved, go to SamaritansPurse.org and sign up.